Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We're on episode 145, and we're finally getting started after probably about 15 minutes of trying to troubleshoot our connection here, right, brother?
Absolutely. It sounded like we were in a brand new studio.
Yeah, so Justin, you are currently on vacation, and we were trying to set up this Zoom call, and like anything technologically based, you run into some issues that you have to kind of work through and problem solve, but we did it. We were just having issues. I think it was like a connection issue where you kept coming in and out and stuff, but you still had service. I'm on Wi-Fi right now for my computer, but ultimately who cares, because we got it all solved. So how's
Yeah, I
vacation
think
so far?
not terrible. It was, not the best so far, but not terrible.
You've been
We
gone for how long now?
So I left Friday afternoon,
Mhm.
and the drive that is super simple for me, it's 10 hours, 10 and a half hours to drive down here.
Yep.
And that's not a problem at all for me or my wife. But my toddler, on the other hand, does not like the car for that long.
Yeah,
So,
I would be much like the toddler. I would not be able to handle it for 10 hours like that.
so we broke it up. We found out she's car sick on the
Ah,
way down. So we got about 3 hours, 4 hours into the ride, and it was good. She just broke the threshold where she can be turned around front facing.
uh-huh.
Uh, Weight wise, when we were cleaning the truck out and kind of getting everything resituated before we left the house, I was looking at the car seat, and the warnings and disclaimers and all the things on the side of the car seat said, one of them was front facing, how you install it front facing, and it was beaming out at me. It was like her age and her weight,
Ah,
basically saying that I can install the car seat front facing, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a life changer, because I don't know, anybody that has kids knows that kids hate looking out the back
mhm.
window. The sun beaming through on them, and they can't see where they're going, and then especially if you compound that with a long trip, they can't see their parents. They can hear you talking, but they can't see it. They don't like it. So we switched it around front facing. We slid her to the middle so she could see us both. Anyways, long story short on that, we got about 4 hours into the trip, and she was great. So we stopped and got some fuel and got back on the road. And she went to having a fit and got car sick.
Ooh.
So, and it was like wild. The most vomit I've ever seen come out of this child in my life. So I was like, holy moly. So we stopped and we cleaned her all up. We changed her. We got to a rest area in Virginia or North Carolina, actually. And no, I take that back. We were still in Virginia. We got into this rest area, real nice rest area, great big grassy area. So we got her cleaned up and let her play for 10 minutes. It was dark. So she was loving it because she's never been outside really at night. And got her back in the truck and we got on the road. So we was like, we're not going to make it. Like originally we wanted to drive straight through with the thought in the back of our mind, if she went to having a fit, we'll stop and just grab a hotel and sleep for a few hours, let her relax, and then get back on the road. So that's what we did. We booked a hotel room, and she made it about another hour, and then she went nuts. She was done. She needed to get out of the truck, but we had like 50 minutes to go. So I was like, it is what it is, like we got to go because we already paid for this hotel room. So
Yep.
that whole first leg of the trip was tough. Second leg wasn't as bad getting down here. Um, the weather, we knew coming into the deal that there was a lot of rain in the forecast with the tropical storm off the coast, but it always says that. So it's like, we're not going to cancel our trip because it's going to rain. Like, whatever. We get down here and it did. It's rained considerable for the last, I don't know, 4 days, anyways. We got a couple good days in the beginning, and then we've had to time it, so to speak, to get to the beach, get everything set up, let her play, which the kid loves the sand now. Like, she likes the sand and the beach and the ocean. Um, she's having a good time, but yeah, it was a whirlwind of a beginning for sure.
And how much longer do you have left there?
Actually, so normally I would be getting ready to start loading the truck up tomorrow, and we would roll out Sunday morning. But we are staying a second week, just about a half hour down the up the coast at another hotel with another set of our family, my wife's mother and her family. So we have another week. We'll be leaving next Saturday. So, or no, I'm sorry, we'll be leaving next Friday. So a week from today, I'll be leaving.
Yeah, so a 14-day vacation ain't too bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you feel mentally though? Do you have like any, I don't know, because we've talked about that before, not necessarily like the homesickness, but for me, when I go anywhere, whether it's vacation or anytime I'm away from home for too lengthy of a time, and we're talking like 3 days max, I get a lot of like anxiety. I don't even know. I know these are synonymous, but I wouldn't even call it anxiety. I'd call it anxiousness. Again, I know those terms are interchangeable, but I feel like anxiousness is kind of like a little bit less intensive than true like clinical anxiety. But I have
Yeah.
some anxiousness when I'm away from home. I have this weird feeling that I need to get home right away and I have things to do, even if there's nothing to do. Like, even if I have like work accounted for and there's nothing around the house that needs done, it's just, I think it's me getting out of that structured routine that's very bothersome for me. And we've talked about it before. One of the things that I'd like to work on or to continue to work on personally is just being a little bit more in tune or a little bit more adept to spontaneity, because I'm not a very spontaneous person and it kind of freaks me out when I do things off the fly or off the cuff. So like I try to like structure, ironically enough, structure spontaneous activities into my life because I need to get better at managing them. So anytime I'm away from the house, dude, I'm not a huge fan. So like, are you kind of in the same boat with that? Consider you've been gone for a week and you have another week, or is it just like so necessary at that point in time that you're enjoying it?
No, a little both. So everybody that knows, anybody that listens to the show regularly or knows me outside of the show or, in real life, knows that I have a homestead. So, I have a very large garden that I planted this year, and I have chickens and, stuff at the house. So leaving everything, it was anxious. I was anxious because this is the biggest garden I've ever put in, and we put a lot of work and time and effort and money into it to actually reap the rewards. Because over the last 5 years since I started homesteading and gardening and raising animals for food, it's not, I don't want to say it's been for a hobby, but it's been so much of the learning curve side of it that it's basically been a hobby,
Yeah.
as to where now we have, I don't want to even dare say mastered it or become proficient, as we would say, but we've definitely made improvements to the point where we're actually putting stuff away in jars. We're actually storing food. We're, getting to the point where we can live longer on our garden than picking it and eating it. So it's, instead of taking it from the vine to the table, we're taking it to the vine to the jar to the table. So, well, it's harvest season for those in the in the Ohio Valley that plant gardens, and I am in South Carolina, so that's been a hurdle. I've been a little anxious about that. Now I got to give a shout out to my brother because he's like, "Hey man, I know you're going on vacation and you got the dog. I'll stay at the house and watch the dog and take care of the chickens and stuff. What all do I need to do?" And I told him, don't worry about it. I've lined up people to come and pick and stuff, no problem. And our first day down here, he called me and says, "Hey, I'm up here in the garden picking some beans and stuff. How do I put these away?" And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, so I kind of walked him through it, and he's like, he harvested my whole garden. Now, I'm not putting it. He didn't put it all away the way I wanted to,
Uh-huh.
but he put it away to a point where it will be usable, and I'm not going to lose a bunch of stuff, and I'll be able to, like the tomatoes that he picked for me. He froze them. I'm going to be able to thaw them out and make sauce and salsa with them and then re-jar them. So I'll be able to use them later. So I was really grateful for him. He took a lot of that anxiety off of my plate for sure, because it's like, you know, when you nurture a plant for 90 days and pick the weeds and weed and water it and make sure that there's no bugs on it, and then you don't get to use it, it can be frustrating. So that
Yeah.
that was cool. He didn't have to. I didn't ask him to, because I know you know him driving an extra hour every day or 2 hours every day from work to and from work, an hour each way, and then taking care of a dog that he doesn't have a dog, staying away from his house,
Mhm.
staying in my guest bedroom instead of in his nice cushy bed. A lot of things that he's doing for me that he didn't have to. So I really appreciated that.
Very
But
ironic, considering you and I just recently recorded and talked about other people's lack of willingness to help sometimes.
right, absolutely, and that's what I was thinking. I honestly, I was sitting on the beach yesterday. I was talking to my wife, and I said, that's it. That's what I said. I was like, I was just talking about this the other day, and my brother, Anthony, stepped up, and he's really doing the exact opposite. So that was really cool.
Then when maybe our previous episode touched some people, and maybe they're feeling more inclined to help others. The thing I was thinking about when you were going through that is my anxiety comes from a little bit of a different lens. So like you have things that actually need done, and mine is, like I mentioned, even when I don't have things that need to be done, the lens that I look through is one of like a worst case scenario checklist. Like that's where I go to, even irrational at times. Like I'll think to myself, like, what if my house is burning down? What if I left something unplugged? What if I left a door unlocked and someone's coming in and looting everything that I have? Like I always go through like this crazy alternate scenario checklist of things that could potentially happen to my house or to the things that I have in there that like bothers me. And I think that some of my nervousness or wanting to come home kind of stems from that too. Even like I said, even when it's irrational at times.
Right.
I don't know if other people do that or if it's normal, but that's where I'm at with some of that stuff.
No, I get that too. Heck, the first time I ever left the house to go on vacation, I got, I don't know, probably 6 hours into the trip, and I had that like a overwhelming feeling that I left the door open, not unlocked, but open.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually I think I called my brother actually and said, "Hey man, can you go?" No, he was with us. I can't remember who I called. Maybe it was my neighbor or one of my buddies. I know this is weird, but can you go to my house, make sure I shut my door?
Yep.
And he's like, "Yeah, I can do that. Why?" And I'm like, "Because I'm in freaking Virginia, and I feel like my back door is open, not unlocked, but open."
I've
So
had
he
that
did,
happen
but
several times, not with that exact same thing, but like the previous place before I purchased my house, my landlord was a cop. And so she would often patrol the area that the place that I rented off of her was, and because it was a smaller town, and I would always there were gosh more frequently than I care to admit where I would text her and say, "Hey, if you're down by the apartment or the house, would you mind checking, seeing if I left the door unlocked? 'Cause I think I left it unlocked," or just little nuanced things like that that I like needed to call to her attention, just because I'm one of those people where it's very and this is a personal flaw that definitely needs worked on also, is when I have something in my head, it's hard for me to get it out. So like take the gym for example. Oftentimes you hear people refer to the gym as like an escape where you don't have to think. And truth be told, for me with the gym, it actually is a place of more overthinking than anything if I have something in my brain. So if I have an issue that's going on or something in my personal life, the gym really isn't affording me an opportunity to like be an escape. I know that a lot of people it does. In fact, a lot of times that's why people like the gym, is because it offers them that opportunity to clear their mind and not really have to think about those things. But like for me, man, it's like if I have something in my head or something that's bothering me, um, and I go to the gym, it's like amplified because I'm trying to forget about it. It's like trying to go to sleep. Like if the harder you try for some people to fall asleep, the more difficult it is for them to fall asleep, because then they start to think about falling asleep and thinking about what's going to happen if they don't fall asleep right now and all this stuff. And it kind of like is like a spiral and it sends them into a free fall where they are not going to get like a wink of sleep. So for me, it's like if I'm in the gym and I have something that I'm worried about, like even something as minuscule as I think I left my door unlocked, that's all I'll be able to think about through the workout. So I like having a clear mind because I sometimes tend to overthink and get things stuck in my head to the point where I ruminate on them too thoroughly or too intensely, and I can't focus on the task at hand, which is certainly something I need to work at, but like I don't even know where to start with that, like how to begin to not think about things. It's
Yeah,
like
that's
if I told you, like, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of an example. Okay, like I have a shaker bottle next to me and it's a purple shaker bottle. If I said, Justin, I want you to not think about this, think about a purple shaker bottle. If I tell you to not think about something, you can't get that image out of your head because now you're trying to not think about it.
thanks, dude. Now I'm thinking about a purple shaker bottle.
See, exactly. And I do that with very, very trivial things. So like obviously big, like there are like circumstantial things that, you know, change the trajectory of your life, like something very catastrophic or, you know, something like that, that you're not going to be able to kind of ostracize out of your brain no matter who you are. But for me, I do that with even little things. Like if I have an appointment that I'm going to be in a time crunch and I'm trying to, you know, navigate in my head how I'm going to make it there on time. That's all I'll think about the whole workout. And it's funny because I always preach to my athletes and my clients about the importance of staying focused and being task oriented with whatever's presented in front of you and trying to not let outside sources dictate your training for that day. But I am like the biggest defender of that. So if our listeners or you yourself, Justin, have any suggestions on how to get out of your head sometimes, that's my biggest obstacle that I need to continue to try to strive to overcome just in my personal life.
I think, the only advice that I can give, because I've had to do this a little bit, is when, especially like in a gym setting, because I think it's more, I think what you're describing is more frequent than we think, you
You mean
know?
with other people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think more people than we think do this on a daily basis. And even as much as those that say that it's a place for them to release, they have no thought, they're just they're in there doing their thing, and that's their release. I don't so much believe that, because it happens, it has to happen to everybody. We can't be the only two that's doing this.
Yeah.
I think my only advice for that is, and it's cliche, but when you find your why, and you focus your efforts on the why. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why is this the reason? What is the reason behind the effort that is going into getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and going to the gym, or working a 12-hour shift and then going to the gym before you go home, or heck, go home, shower, change, then go to the gym, then come back home. Why am I taking this time out of my day to make sure that I get into the gym to do these things?
Yep.
And
Yeah,
if you
that's
do
true.
that,
I think it's with everything. Like if you have like a, because oh gosh, what's the saying that I love? It's like direction, not intention, dictates success. So it's like
yes,
you could have, because like I've used this several times, the analogy of driving the car. You could drive the car, metaphorically speaking, drive the car real fast, but if you're heading in the wrong direction, you're not going to get where you want to go. So it's like you could work
right.
really, really hard, but if you're not working hard intelligently at the right things, then it's not going to make you successful. So I can kind of like superimpose that into into kind of what we're talking about here, where if you're not focused on the task at hand and you're focused elsewhere, that hard work isn't really going to be validated. So you just got to focus on why am I here? And I think that actually, when you talk about that, there's kind of like a side tangent in my brain that I kind of want to discuss in a lot more detail, kind of changing pace a little bit, but it's definitely something worth discussing, especially because you and I are what I would consider to be mental health advocates. Like
Oh, absolutely.
that's a topic that we bring up very, very frequently. And it's one of those topics that, regardless of how many times you and I discuss it, we don't have a large enough platform or a frequent enough platform to talk about it enough. Even if you and I came up here every week and every Saturday when we posted an episode, the entire episode was under the premise of like talking about mental health, that would not be enough because it's only once a week for an hour or so. So I
I
don't
would go
mind
as far.
continuing to hammer on that,
Yeah, I would go as far to say is if we recorded this podcast daily, did an hour podcast every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and we talked nothing other than mental health and ways to deal with mental health illness or mental health issues,
Yeah,
it wouldn't be enough.
absolutely. So like I mentioned, I want to take a little bit of a side conversation because I think that it's really imperative and kind of stemmed from what we're talking about. So let's go to a quick commercial break and we'll talk more about that side conversation when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram and order your delicious baked goods today because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we are back from our commercial break. All right, Justin, prior to the break, you said something when we were talking about like anxiety and things that we worry about and all that stuff. And you said, we were talking about stuff like that. And you said that you think that it happens more frequently than a lot of us would believe. And interestingly enough, one of the things that kind of like made me think about, and it's a super prevalent topic that people discuss that needs talked about more, is like when you talk about mental health advocacy, one of the things that is often preached is like, you're not alone. Like there's people out there to help. Like there's people that have been through this. And I think that's true with pretty much everything that we go through in life. So when you have problems, it's very easy for you to like isolate yourself in a sense and believe that you're the only person that has these issues or this type of question or feels this sort of way. And I think that there's something to be said about the fact that like, no matter what it is, you're not alone, good or bad. So talking specifically about mental health, when you go through issues or circumstances that cause you to be in a less than ideal mind frame, it's very, very, very common for us to say, like, no one understands or no one gets this. And that's like a product of societal norms, like we've talked about before with like social media, right? Like I can put on social media exactly what I want people to see, so my life looks perfect. And then the reality is all those people's lives that you see that are perfect are not. Like I've had so many discussions, and this is a product of me being an open person. And I'm glad that I'm like this because I try to be egoless in a sense. So I'm very confident in certain things, but I also am humble enough and like am not like a super self-righteous person where I can actually like have enough humility to admit things like my shame, like my faults, things that I'm not good at, things that I want to improve on. And I'm like very open booked, so to speak, when it comes to that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And because I've kind of like engendered those conversations or like sparked those conversations with people, it's allowed me to recognize that people go through things that you wouldn't even realize. Like people that seem like they don't have certain issues are like, yeah, I have a lot of anxiety or I have a lot of depression, or I have like horrible obsessive compulsive disorder that, I'm treated for, that I don't really, that I'm good at kind of self-monitoring where I'm not showing people those habits as much. And so I think that I kind of wanted to just stem a discussion about talking about that sort of thing. And again, we can take this away from the mental health aspect. I just think it's a really good example, but pretty much everything you go through, there is a resource to be able to help because people have been through that problem. I mean, there's 7.5 billion people in the world. Whatever it is that you have going on in your life, like professionally, financially, mentally, emotionally, relationship-wise, whatever, there is currently, I wouldn't say one person, but statistically at the very least one other person that's going through that same thing. So you're not alone. And I think that's just an open discussion that you and I need to have about those sorts of things, because you and I have a pretty big platform where we can reach people. And I think what it boils down to is transparency. Like if we show true transparency and show that we're human and show that we have faults and we admit them and we almost like borderline flaunt our faults, I think that's, gosh, man, I don't want to put myself on a pedestal and use the term inspirational, but it's almost inspirational in a sense that like it gives people the inspiration or at least the courage to admit that they have a lot of flaws too, you know?
Right. Absolutely. And that's where it starts, you know. And it's almost like taking a page out of the 12 steps, right? It's recognizing you have a problem first.
Yeah, the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem, they say.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't, having a problem doesn't have to mean you have a physical problem, like a physical ailment, but there's a task that you don't know how to complete.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as, let me think, something very mundane. My new job. I got to my office. I got a bunch of work done. I needed to print, and I could not figure out. I printed all this stuff. I went to the printer, not on the printer. I went back to my office. I hit print again. Went to the printer. It's not on the printer.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't figure it out. And it was kind of time sensitive. And I started to low key freak out. So I called my boss and I said, "Hey man, I'm having a problem. I can't get my stuff to print." And he's like, "All your stuff's on my printer." So we had a printer that our system where when you're in an office, it links up to the server and it automatically selects the last printer you were connected to and would print your information, print your documents.
Yep.
The last printer my computer was hooked up to was his printer, not my printer in my other office. So I had no idea. So I was panicking. But instead of just sitting there and panicking for 8 hours, I made a phone call. I recognized that I didn't know. I didn't know the answer. And I called and I got the answer. So that's kind of, just a real life situation, where it's not gym, it's not weight loss, it's not financial, it's not, marital. It's, just a day to day thing. Like you need to recognize your shortcomings.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, you'll never have less shortcomings.
Yeah. And you're never going to overcome the hurdle unless you're able to see the hurdle and be open about the hurdle being there.
Right. You got to take the blinders off.
Yeah.
That's the key in my head. Like, for overcoming mental health issues and our problems, because we all have them. Like you said, there's, what did you say, 7 billion people on this planet?
Yeah, probably about 7.5 billion, I would think.
There's 7.5 billion people on this planet. There's probably whole communities worth of people that have the exact same problems that each of us have.
Well, it says, I just looked this up just so we can be completely transparent. According to Wikipedia, it says, in demographics, the term world population is often used to refer to the total number of humans currently living and was estimated to have exceeded 7.9 billion as of November 2021. So it's even more than 7.5 billion.
It's even more than 7.9 billion because there's how many babies born a day? How many babies are born an hour?
Yeah. But then you also have to factor in the fact that people are dying in the hours too. But I think based on the trajectory that it's increasing, although I will say this, not that I want to get off topic, but Elon Musk evidently is promoting that population decline is actually becoming a threat now too. I think it's predicated on like production and manpower to do all the things that we need to keep our world running from a technological standpoint or from like a modern standpoint. But anyway, to go back to the topic at hand, yeah, I agree with you about taking the blinders off for sure. And I think that there's kind of like a shared responsibility on our behalf. Not that we are like Joe Rogan here, that we get to reach billions of people or millions of people, but I do think that when you have a position where the ears and the eyes are on you, I think that there's kind of an assumed importance. So like you kind of have a responsibility to do things a certain way, like professional athletes. Like I've often heard the argument for and against this, but like how professional athletes have a more moral and ethical obligation to carry themselves a certain way because they have fans, particularly
Absolutely.
children. So, like for me, I take a lot of
Absolutely.
pride in teaching, for example, and I am in charge, quote unquote, of dozens and dozens of 10-year-olds every day. So, like for me, I can kind of dictate, like they're going to feed off of my energy, and a lot of how they develop over the next year is going to be based on the things that I teach them, both academically and non-academically. So I kind of have a moral and ethical obligation to make sure I'm a good person. Well, one of the things that I try to do with the kids is also be transparent, because when you're a teacher, and maybe you, I don't know, I mean, it's been a long time that we've been removed from it now, but like you remember thinking that your teachers are like infallible, like they never
Yeah.
make mistakes, they're perfect, all this stuff. So like I always tell the kids like things that I'm not good at, and I'm very effusive with it. Like I tell them all the time, like where my flaws are and stuff like that, because I think that a lot of times when you approach kids, they're sensitive and they're self-conscious, especially when they're like a preteen, because my kids are 10, 11, in fifth grade, and they're starting to develop a sense of I don't know, like a sense of like self-consciousness, um, especially with their peers, where they kind of have to try to sit like fit into like
A group.
normalities. Like I need to act normal and dress a certain way because I want to be liked. So a lot of them are afraid to like admit that they're not good at things because of like judgment or whatever. And like I said, I'm just over the top with telling them things that I'm terrible at and things that I can't do very well. And I tell them like it's even on a relative basis. Like one of the things that I've never been super great at is spelling. Now, I say that in the relative format because, like, for me, I would probably say that just based on my education, that I'm probably more well versed in spelling than most people. But I think relative to my own skill set, like ANC endings and ENC endings. Like sometimes
Yeah.
I forget which ones or which words to use, and I'm like, or which spellings to use. So I'm not really the greatest speller in the world. I think a product that's kind of a product of how you and I were raised, being the same age, was we were kind of like the integration of the technology era. So like we had like spell check on our computers when we first started typing. So like if a word was wrong, I could see that it was wrong because it was underlined in red in Microsoft Word, and then I could right click and it would tell me how to spell it. So I
Right.
could see the correction. So I didn't have to be as proficient at spelling. But anyway, so you say those things, the kids are like, well, you're a teacher. Of course you know how to spell. And it's like, no, no, no. I'm not saying that I don't know how to spell or I'm terrible at it. I'm just saying relative to my other skills, I don't think this is something I'm good at. One of the things that I talk to everybody about is my lack of ability. Like my worst job or the worst thing I could do would be anything like, I don't want to say engineering or design based because I can conceptualize it in my head and map things out and plan them. But when it comes to physically doing the task, I can't, like I can't build things. Like if I was like a contractor or something where I had to build things, there's absolutely no way. I'm not very good with my hands, like taking things apart and fixing things, like anything like car related, anything electrical related, like even something like, for example, our training group helped me put a shed together a while ago because
Hmm.
they were very very kind in telling me that I've helped them over the years, and I asked for them to give me a hand with some yard stuff. Like I had to borrow their trucks to haul. I had a fire pit from the house that I bought that I took out, and I did a bunch of tree trimming in my back property. And I have all these like huge like branches that I have no way of getting out of my yard. And I live in a residential area, so there's nowhere to put them. So I needed some help with that stuff. And like I got one of those shed kits
Hmm.
where it's kind of like it's a shed that's disassembled and it gives you all the materials you have to put them together. I could not do that by myself. Like there's no way that I could put it together with my own hands and figure out the directions and all that stuff, because I have a pretty low frustration threshold. So I would quit too.
Same.
I remember one time I put together a basketball hoop, like one of those rollaway basketball hoops that you put water in the base or sand in the base. And it took me, it probably would take a normal person like an hour, 45 minutes. It took me like literally 8 hours. Like, it was ridiculous. And I also cannot do anything, like I said, like car related. So I had them come and help me build the shed, and I was kind of called myself the foreman because I was doing more supervising than anything. And then when you get a shed, you have to make sure the ground's perfectly level. So even though your ground could be perfectly flat, that doesn't necessarily mean it's perfectly level. So my backyard was very slightly sloped. So we had to go to the lumber store and get some wood to build a base and use the balance to make sure that it was perfectly level in my backyard. Well, our mutual friend Trevor did that all for me within probably 20 minutes. Like, we went to the lumber store up the road. He works in cementing, and he has they have like a company account at this lumber place that we were able to get the lumber real quick. And it was, coincidentally enough, 3 minutes from my house. So we went, picked up the lumber, came back, and he put together a base and balanced it out and everything for my shed within a half hour. It was unbelievable. And I told him, dude, for me to YouTube how to do that and figure out, like, I don't use power tools. I said, that would have taken me 3 days to do that. There's no way. So anyway, my point is that, like, I have no shame in admitting that I suck at things. And you'll notice that your life, you get so much comfort in not having an ego with things like that. Like, I remember my dad, and like specifically my dad, but to a degree, both my parents. Like, when you're a kid and you see your parents or your grandparents or whoever you live with, and they do things, and like, it amazes you that they're not embarrassed by them. Like, the way they dress, the way they act, like stuff like that. And as a kid, you're like mortified. Like, you have to look cool, and you want to like if your parents drive a crappy car, like sometimes you get embarrassed because of the car that you get picked up in. Or if your house isn't perfect, like sometimes you get embarrassed, like if you have like really rich friends, by how your house looks or whatever. And you get self-conscious about all these like trivial things that don't matter. And you look at your parents and you're like, doesn't that bother them too? And then as you get older and wiser, you realize that, like, it doesn't matter what people think. Like, it doesn't matter if I mean, I guess to a degree it may be frustrating, but like, your financial situation isn't what you want it to be, or it doesn't matter to you. It's okay to say, yeah, I don't have a lot of money. That's just where I'm at right now. And once you are able to control your ego to the point of admitting your faults and failures, that is when you're able to overcome them. But like you said, people keep the blinders on.
Absolutely.
And like, I don't know if some people, because you probably have like different paradigms here. Like, you have some people that are in the demographic that, like, I don't even recognize these because I don't see my faults. But I think most people would fall in the category of, I see my faults, I just don't want to let other people see them because that won't look good for me.
I agree. And I resonate with the car thing, the car analogy you said. Growing up, I'm infatuated with trucks. I love trucks. My wife used to say that she would get jealous about the way when I'd see it, when we would pass a truck,
Yeah.
and that I really liked, I would get, overly excited about this truck. And she's like, you don't get like that about me. And I'm like, whatever, I played it off, no big deal. But she was right. Trucks, I have a thing about trucks. I love trucks. And as I get older, and I've removed the blinders and realized that that's just material, and you don't really need a brand new truck. Like, I always wanted a brand new truck. Well, I got a nice used truck, and I don't think I'll ever buy a new one. Like, honestly, I've been in my head on the ride down here. I was like, what can we do to increase the longevity of this 100,000 mile truck that I'm driving now? Which
Yes.
normally, in my life, leading up until, like, literally up until the time I was 31, which was last year,
Mm-hmm.
it was yeah, my truck's got 70,000 miles on. My truck's got 80,000 miles on. I need to get a new truck. Like I need a new truck because this one's not going to last. And now there's been a shift in like, and it's almost like I'm removing them blinders. Like I'm taking them off. Like that's not necessary.
So
What can
one
you
of
do
my,
to?
excuse me, one of my
No, you're good.
mentors that I've been talking, my newer mentors that I've been talking to recently, her name's Dr. Martha Nestler. And she's based out of Florida, and she lived in New Zealand for a long period of time. She was a chiropractor down there and opened up a few businesses and stuff. And we were talking, and she said how there's just a complete cultural difference in multiple ways, but specifically in this between New Zealand and America. And she said that in New Zealand, like, or in America, people brag about the newest things. Like, look at my new car, look at my new house, look at my new watch, that sort of stuff. And it's always like who can buy the newest, most expensive things. And that's kind of looked at as like a social elitist type thing. She said
Yeah.
that in New Zealand, people brag about the opposite. Like, look how long I've had this car for and been able to maintain it. Look how long, or look how, what good of a deal I got on this cheap pair of whatever, these cheap pair of shoes. And like, that's more like of a social status than anything, is being frugal and having longevity with your things. And it's funny you say that about the car, because like literally the exact same thing. A year or two ago, I've got a pretty nice vehicle. And in my adult life, as I progress financially, I've gotten a nicer and nicer car every time I purchased one. Like I've never gone
That's the
backwards in a
goal.
car purchase. And I have what I would estimate to be a very nice vehicle. And there are so many times, like, and it's increasing in frequency, where I say to myself, I want to just trade this in and get something crappy. Like, I don't like the car payment. There is no point in me having this nice vehicle. Like, this vehicle has done, like people compliment me when they ride in it, but like, what has it done for me aside from remove money from my pockets? And I said to someone that if I were to do this again, I certainly wouldn't buy this. And the reason I switched vehicles is because the vehicle that I had previously to this was starting to, and we live in, the northeastern or Midwestern United States. So we got a ton of snow, obviously. And there was a little bit, very, very minor, on both door panels, or just right below the door, on both the passenger and the driver's side, the front door was starting to show. Now, it wasn't rusted out, but the paint was starting to like brown a little bit. You know what I mean? And the car was not old at all by any means. I mean, I didn't have over 100,000 miles on it. I think I only had like 90,000 miles maybe. And it was only, well, it was a lease beforehand, so it had low mileage, but it was couple years old. I think it was it's probably like a 4-year-old car, maybe 5-year-old car, if that, but it was starting to rust already. And that is like wildfire. Once that process starts, you can fix it, but you have to pay a lot of money to fix it the right way. Because if
Rust
you don't
never
spend a
sleeps.
lot of money, what's that?
Rust never sleeps.
No, never. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to nip this in the bud early and take care of it. That way I don't have to deal with it later. So what I did was bought the new traded that one in, got a good trade in, had a good trading value, and then bought a new vehicle. And I looked back in retrospect and was like, you know what I should have done is I should have let that stuff turn brown from the wheel all the way to the top of the car, because it doesn't matter. I should have ran that sucker into the ground, because I wouldn't have had a car payment for a while. And I regret not doing that, just because, and I don't think I was like, maybe it was like, maybe it was like subconscious, but I didn't like necessarily go looking for a car for like social status. I didn't like go out thinking I'm going to get a nice car and have everybody see this, but maybe there was a subconscious part of me that wanted to do that. And let me kind of like look at the other side of the coin real quick and tell people that like, there is nothing wrong with wanting nice things. If you have the financial means to do something and you want to have nice things, by all means, go out and do nice things. Just do it for you. Do it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Do it because you want the nice thing, not because you want other people to see the nice thing,
Yeah. You know, take what I'm doing right now, for example, vacation. If you can afford to go on vacation, do it, but don't do it so you can post the pictures on social media.
Yes.
That's one thing that I've done differently this year than I've ever done. Is I don't believe I've posted anything other than maybe a picture or two on my Snap story, or sent a couple pictures to a close group of friends. I haven't posted any pictures of my vacation.
Yep.
Does that mean that there's a lack of memories made? Absolutely not.
And
I have
sometimes
the
that's actually
pictures.
the opposite. It lets you soak in the memories more.
Right. And I have the pictures. I've taken pictures. I just haven't shared them with the world because this is not a social status thing. I'm not on vacation so you can say, "Oh man, Justin makes a bunch of money because he can go on vacation."
Yep.
No, I'm doing things. I'm going on vacation so my kid has memories. So my family have memories.
Yep.
And I like where you went with that because, you know, there isn't anything wrong with, like, I'm driving this old truck, and I'm not saying this is an old truck because I'm sitting here in a parking lot looking at two trucks in front of me that are M in the South, so like they're in really good shape, but they're like 80s.
Yep.
So I'm sitting in a 2013. It's not old. It's older than my work truck. It's a 2021, but it's not old. It's in great shape. I don't need a new one.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that can
And
be, not that we're going to revolutionize people's way of thinking. Everybody's going to go trade in their vehicles and get something old and crappy after this episode. But maybe that can be a good place to start to wrap it up and interject some actionable steps of leave the ego at the door. Check the ego a little bit. Don't be afraid to admit what you're not good at or things that need improvement or your personal flaws. And maybe even make an effort this week to tell those to people, share them with someone, say, "Hey, I'm not good at this." And don't be afraid to ask for help with them. Like me, I'll outsource everything. If I'm not good
so
at
I do
something,
that.
I have no shame on asking someone, "Hey, I'm not good at this. Could you help me, please?"
Yeah, that's so much of an easy, and this kind of sounds ego, but it's not, I promise. That is such an easy task for me to do as an actionable step because I literally talk about my flaws every day.
Yep.
Because that's the first step, in my opinion, to getting better at those things is to put them out there, put them on the table. If everybody played with their hand facing out and everybody's seen everybody else's cards, it's so much easier of a game to play.
I agree with that. So let's just, everybody, make an effort this week to reach out to people and don't be afraid to show your flaws, because I think that we can relate to the fact, going back full circle, is that we all have issues, and you'll find that a lot more people have the same issues that you have.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. This has been episode 145. As always, we appreciate your listenership, and we look forward to hearing back from you guys next week.
Unbreakable, unstoppable, I'm pushed to the edge and take it all. I'm born to be untamable, go right to the edge and